There's something nobody tells you about understanding yourself. It doesn't automatically change anything. You can read the right things, watch the right videos, finally find the words for something you've carried for years. Feel that quiet relief of recognition. Oh, so that's what this is. And then sit down that same evening and feel exactly the same way you always have. The understanding is real, and the feeling is still there. Maybe you've experienced this, that strange gap between knowing something and actually feeling different because of it, between the explanation that finally made sense and the part of you that didn't seem to get the memo. You understood it, and it stayed anyway. That gap is what this is about. Have you ever tried to talk yourself out of a feeling? Not dramatically, just quietly, in the middle of an ordinary moment, reminding yourself that things are fine, that there's nothing to worry about, that the situation has changed, and the thing you used to brace for isn't coming anymore, and the feeling stays exactly where it is. This is one of the more frustrating things about the nervous system. It doesn't speak the language of insight. You look around and realize there isn't actually a problem to solve. The bills are paid, the conversation is over, the difficult period has passed. By all appearances, it's safe to relax. But some part of you hasn't caught up yet. Not because it's being stubborn, but because it didn't learn what it knows through logic in the first place. The nervous system learned through experience, through things that actually happened in a body that actually felt them, through moments that taught it to stay ready, to pay attention, to be cautious around certain kinds of silence and certain kinds of uncertainty. Logic is a different dialect entirely. Maybe you've noticed this in yourself. The pattern finally makes sense. You can explain it clearly. You can even trace it back to where it started. And still, somehow, knowing all of that doesn't make the feeling disappear. The understanding sits in one place. The nervous system runs in another. And the system keeps standing guard anyway. So if logic doesn't reach it, what does? Have you ever noticed the difference between knowing something is safe and actually feeling safe? The two can exist at the same time, pointing in completely different directions. The mind says there's nothing wrong. The body stays quietly braced, and no amount of reasoning seems to close the distance between those two things. That distance is where this gets interesting. The nervous system isn't waiting for a reason. It's waiting for evidence, a very specific kind of evidence, the kind that doesn't arrive as a thought, but as a sensation, a moment where the body registers something it hasn't registered in a long time, that it's safe to be here. Not conceptually safe, not logically there's nothing wrong, actually safe, physically safe, in this body, in this moment, safe. That's a different thing. And for people whose systems learned early to treat stillness with suspicion, that feeling can be surprisingly unfamiliar. Not impossible, just unfamiliar. And here's the part that takes a moment to sit with. Unfamiliar things often feel a little like danger to the nervous system, even when they're not, which means the very thing the system needs, genuine rest, genuine safety, can sometimes trigger the same quiet alarm as the things it was originally protecting against, because both are unknown. And unknown to a system built on pattern recognition means proceed with caution. Have you ever talked to someone who had been through something similar? Not someone who offered advice or tried to fix it or explain it away. Just someone who genuinely understood. Not the facts of what happened, but what it felt like from the inside. Most people describe the same thing when that happens. Something in them goes quiet. Not because the problem was solved, but because something inside stopped having to explain itself for a moment, stopped having to justify, stopped having to translate, stopped having to make the experience understandable to someone who wasn't quite getting it. There's a reason that feels different from simply being alone with your thoughts. And it's worth understanding because it's the thing most conversations about nervous system patterns skip over entirely. The system doesn't reset most efficiently alone. That sounds simple. It lands differently the longer you sit with it. We are wired, not metaphorically, but biologically, to regulate each other. The nervous system of one person responds to the nervous system of another. A calm, safe presence can affect the body of the person beside them in ways that solitude, however peaceful, does differently. This has a name, co-regulation, but it isn't really a clinical term. It's closer to a description of something the body already knows how to do, when the conditions feel safe enough to allow it. The problem is that for many people, those conditions were never quite reliable. The people who were supposed to provide that feeling of safety were sometimes inconsistent, sometimes unavailable, sometimes carrying something heavy enough that calm wasn't something they could offer. And so the system, practical, adaptive, always looking for a way to cope, stopped building that expectation in. It found other ways to manage: solitude, control, the quiet but exhausting project of needing very little from anyone. Learning to be so self-sufficient that dependence never had the chance to disappoint. And those strategies worked. In the context they were built for, they worked remarkably well. But the original wiring is still there. The body still responds to genuine, safe connection in a way it doesn't respond to anything else. And the gap between what the system needs and what it learned to expect doesn't always announce itself clearly. It shows up instead as the friend group where something still feels slightly missing. The relationship that looks fine from the outside, but doesn't quite reach somewhere deeper. The persistent low-level feeling of being alone, even when surrounded by people who genuinely care. Not because anything is wrong with those connections, because the system learned a long time ago that needing them was a risk not worth taking. You might be wondering what it actually looks like when something starts to change. It doesn't look like a turning point. There's no moment of sudden calm after years of restlessness. No morning where you wake up and the background hum is simply gone. It's quieter than that and easier to miss. Maybe you've experienced something like this before, a conversation that felt surprisingly easy. Nothing extraordinary happened. Nobody solved your problems. There was just a sense of ease. The words came more naturally. The usual tension wasn't there. For a little while, there was no need to measure every sentence, no need to wonder how it would be received. And somewhere in that ordinary moment, something inside relaxed. A slightly longer exhale. Shoulders that dropped without trying. The kind of rest that actually restored something instead of simply pausing the noise for a while. These moments don't announce themselves as progress. They don't feel significant in any obvious way. They feel more like a small, quiet surprise. Oh, that was different. And that's exactly what they are. New information. The system encountering something it wasn't expecting. Evidence that gently contradicts the old pattern. Not enough to rewrite everything. Not yet. But enough to register. Enough to stay somewhere in the record of what the body has experienced. The system updates the same way it got stuck, through experience, slowly, one moment at a time. The difference is that now, the experience is safety instead of threat. Here's what matters most about all of this. Resetting the nervous system isn't about fixing something that's broken. The system that stayed on alert, that made rest feel like exposure, that kept the guard standing long after the original threat had passed, wasn't malfunctioning. It was doing exactly what experience taught it to do. Staying ready, keeping watch, making sure nothing arrived unannounced. It learned well. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. The difficulty is that the world can change while the rules stay the same. Because the same loyalty that kept the protective program running, that patient, unwavering commitment to keeping you safe, is exactly what makes the system slow to accept that the program is no longer needed. It isn't looking for a reason to change. It's looking for evidence. Small moments, repeated moments, moments that quietly suggest the old rules don't apply in the same way anymore. That stillness can be safe. That connection doesn't always cost something. That the body is allowed to arrive somewhere and actually stay there. That evidence takes time to accumulate. I think about this sometimes. The particular kind of patience it requires, not the forced patience of trying harder or pushing through the discomfort. The quieter kind, the kind that notices a small moment of ease and doesn't immediately move past it. The kind that lets something register before the next thing begins. That kind of patience probably doesn't come naturally if slowing down never felt safe, which means it's one more thing worth extending to yourself. The shift is still available, not as a destination, not as a fixed state you arrive at and stay in forever, more like a direction, small moments of felt safety, accumulated slowly, given enough time to mean something to a system that is listening more carefully than it might appear. It just needs a different kind of evidence than you've been trying to give it. And now, at least, you know what it's listening for.